Do you think government should step in and have a stake in the moderation? Do you think a third party, perhaps like an independent board, should have a stake to almost create like a unanimous way of moderating Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Or how would you go about changing what we have right now?
That is such an excellent question again. And I know that the EU as an organization has been trying to come up with like a way of thinking about how do we moderate this. And it's very fraught, it's very difficult, etc., etc. But it almost is government through the democratic principle that needs to do it. So it's almost about governments need to have the conversation with their citizens about what kind of moderation do we allow or do we bring in to make sure that things don't get out of control. And there are precedents for this. When in the 1920s, when radio became big in the US, 1920s, 1930s, when radio became a big medium of communication in the US, that conversation was had. And people became concerned about the power of radio to influence public opinion. And so what was brought in that period of time was a strong regulation of what you were allowed to say on radio and what you were not allowed to say on radio. This is the country of free speech, by the way. And it wasn't a limit on free speech in and of itself. Everyone could say anything they wanted to say on the street, in their houses, to other people. But what it meant was like, it was understood that it's not necessary to give everyone a platform to reach millions of people. That isn't part of the right to free speech. So the right to free speech in the 1920s, 1930s was not understood to come with a right to a platform to reach millions of people. And so those rules were brought in. They were kept in place until the 1980s. And in the early 1980s, they were eradicated. They were taken off the books. And that led them to a new sort of really polarized and polarizing radio to emerge in the US at that time, which then led to the Alex Joneses, the conspiracy radio of Alex Jones and people like him, who then started to fuel the polarization even further. In sort of like they started to get really big traction from early 2000 onwards. So we've had precedents, we've had that conversation as a democracy or as democracies to decide there are certain kinds of things that we don't need to give a platform that can reach millions of people for.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you need to police the kinds of thoughts that people are allowed to express in conversation on the street, so to speak. And so there was a difference when like back in the day when Speaker's Corner was a thing in Hyde Park. I mean, it is still a thing on a Saturday or a Sunday. There will still be people that get on a soapbox and talk about the things that really matter to them. And that should always be allowed. We shouldn't stop that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean that everyone, all of us with the weirdest ideas, automatically have the right to a platform where we can reach everyone in the world, because that could be very dangerous at the same time.